Comedian Judy Tenuta said, "My parents always told me I wouldn't amount to anything because I procrastinated so much. I told them, just you wait." Are you waiting to do something that's important to you? My dad waited. He thought he had time. My dad's goal, his dream, was to visit the national parks. He wanted to see Zion and Yellowstone, but he promised himself he would do that someday. He would do it when he would retire. But first, he had all these people to take care of, all these responsibilities. And so he worked 6 or 7 days a week for 40 years. And when he retired, he took off on that long deferred dream to visit the national parks. And a week later, he had a stroke in a hotel bathroom. My dad eventually recovered, but he never got to do what he always wanted to do. What is it you always wanted to do? What is a dream that you might be deferring? What is a passion project that could put the light on in your eyes and you're promising yourself you'll do it someday? Rene Ricard said tomorrow is another day, but so is yesterday. What will it take for us to have a wake-up call? You know, for me, my wake-up call came because of my son, Andrew Horn. Thank heaven for Andrew. I had just finished a very intensive consult down in Southern California, and Andrew called, and he must have sensed something in my voice because he said, "What's up, Mom?" And I said, "Andrew, I'm so exhausted. I don't know how I'm going to get on that plane tonight. I've got to catch a red-eye back to DC and then fly back to San Francisco in a couple of days to keynote a conference. I don't know how I'm going to do it." And Andrew said, "Mom, there's something about you I don't understand. Why are you working yourself to death? You have your own business. You could do things differently if you wanted to." Boy, out of the mouths of 20-somethings, huh? He didn't stop there. He said, "Why don't I book you into a hotel and you can stay there tonight and just fly up to San Francisco on Friday. And tomorrow, why don't you take a day of hooky? And why don't you think about your life and how you could do more of what you want now instead of later? As Paulo Coelho said, one day we're going to wake up and there won't be any time left to do the things we always wanted to do." So I went to sleep an hour later with the sounds of the waves outside my open window. And the next morning I got up and I threw on my backpack and I went off exploring, and I was drawn to the Laguna Beach bookstore. And I went over to the shelves of the books by and for writers, and I'm leafing through Bird by Annie Lamott, and a voice wells up in me and whispers in my ear, "You are a writer. That's who you are. You're a writer." But see, I'd fallen victim to the consultant creative conundrum. I spent most of my time facilitating other people's work instead of focusing on my own. But I thought, what if I could have both? And so I went back to the hotel and I turned the desk to face the ocean and I wrote the rest of the afternoon, and I kept thinking, I love writing, I love the water, I want and need to work with clients. What if I could have it all? What if I could go on a year by the water? Now, I remembered what my mom said. She said, if you don't put a date on the calendar, it's not going to happen. So I thought, okay, what's the date? October 1st. I'm going on October 1st. And on October 1st, I set out on my year by the water. And I had an opportunity to swim with Zach the dolphin. And I sailed the Chesapeake Bay with Captain Jen. And I even went to Helen Keller's birthplace, and I put my hand under the very same water pump where she said her first word, water. Now, the thing is, people, when they hear about my year by the water, they would gaze wistfully off into space and they would say, someday I'm going to do something like that. And I would tell them someday is not a day in the week. And many of them would push back. They would say, you don't know my life. I've got responsibilities. I'm working 2 jobs just to pay the bills or to pay off this college debt. Or I've got parents with dementia. That's a full-time job on top of a full-time job. Or I'm a single mom and I have a kid with special needs. And they would say, I can't go off on a year by the water. You know, I'm just putting one foot in front of another. And I thought to myself, and I told them the good news, what I learned on my year by the water is that we don't need more time, and we don't need more money, and we don't need more freedom. What we need are some shifts in mindset. Here's one of them. The first one happened the very first day on the year by the water. I was headed to the eastern shore. So is a hurricane. So I've got my hands on my 10 and 2 position. I'm fighting to keep the car on the road, and a little thought bubble pops up and says, why drive into a hurricane? Well, because I have commitments. I told her I'd be there at 9 o'clock, right? And we keep our commitments no matter what, right? When I was growing up in Southern California and we had animals and it was a stormy night and I asked my parents, do I have to feed the rabbits tonight? Can't I do it tomorrow? You know what they would say? Do the right thing. So see, I think many of us feel the right thing is we keep our commitments no matter what. We keep our commitments even when they're making us sick, even when they're putting us at risk. But what if we could renegotiate some of these commitments? I called my friend. I said, it's getting a little intense out here. I said, is it okay if I change my mind? She didn't even have to think about it. She said, take care of yourself. The place will be there when you're ready for it. Here's my question. Are you driving into hurricanes? Because you were taught to keep your commitments and it's the right thing to do. What if we could revisit some of those commitments that are putting us at risk? What if we could come up with alternatives that are actually healthier and happier for all involved? How about another lesson learned from the year by the water? I bet you recognize that place. We're here in California at South Lake Tahoe, and of course that's the famous Pacific Coast Highway. Now that's during the day. And during the day, you can see ahead. You see, here's a 180-degree hairpin turn, and then you make another 90-degree turn the other way. I made a mistake. I didn't drive it during the day. I got there at dusk. And a half an hour later, the sun was completely down, and there was no moon, and it was completely dark. In fact, it was so dark, I could not see anything beyond my headlights. And the road kept curving out from underneath my headlights, and I lost my equilibrium. I'm driving 15 miles an hour. I can do this, but it is a surreal experience. And then a truck zooms up behind me and honks his horn. And I did what I'd always been taught to do. I looked for some place to pull over, to let him go first, to let him go ahead. Oh, here's a pullover. And I pull over and I start braking, and it's gravel. And the more I brake, the more I slide. And I finally come to a stop a foot from the cliff's edge. And I sat there and I shook. And I thought, my lifelong habit of saying, oh no, you go ahead, you go first, almost cost me my life. Our strength, taken to an extreme, is our Achilles heel. And I think many of us have gotten very good at serving other people. No, you go ahead. You go first. We put everyone else first and ourselves last. We're taking ourselves out of our own story because we learned along the way it was selfish to do what we wanted, that the right thing to do is to take care of other people. At what cost? Here's what I'm asking. What we model, we teach. So when we say, no, everybody else go first, I go last, we're saying, I don't matter. Is that what we want to teach to our loved ones, that we sacrifice ourselves for others? Or is there a balance? Is there a balance in taking care of other people and taking care of ourselves and doing at least one thing a week that would put the light on in our eyes? Now, one woman said, Sam, I don't know what that one thing is. It's been so long since I've had a chance to do what I want to do. I don't even know what that is. Well, here's a little 4-minute exercise we can do right now, right here, to figure out what that one thing might be that would put the light on in your eyes. Box number 1. Now, please think about whatever comes to mind first. Don't censor it, judge it, because often what comes up is gut instinct. It's giving you the answers to the test. So what are you doing in your life that you want to? Maybe what you're doing in your life that you want to in terms of health is you're walking every day. Maybe what you're doing in your life that you want to in terms of relationships is you're having date night with your spouse. Maybe what you're doing that you want to is that you're singing. You've always loved to sing and you're in your church choir. Now let's go to the second box. What are you not doing that you want to? Maybe what you're not doing that you want to is to write a book or start a business or go back to school, or maybe it's just to get an extra hour of sleep tonight. What are you not doing that you want to? Now go to box 3. What are you doing that you don't want to? Maybe you're spending hours a day on social media and it's become an addiction and you're doing it, but you really don't want to be doing it. Maybe you're working 60, 70 hours a week to a point of exhaustion. Maybe what you're doing that you don't want to is fighting with someone that you love. Now go to box 4. What are you not doing and you don't want to? And yes, I know that's a double negative. But this is where the hurricanes are that we're no longer driving into. These are our lessons learned. Maybe you used to smoke, you quit, you don't do it anymore. Maybe you used to commute 2 hours a day and you hated it, so you moved into the city and you don't do it anymore and you don't want to do it again. So now let's interpret your responses to this happiness box. When you look at the first and the fourth box, that's what's right with your life. That's what's contributing to your quality of life. Now think about the answers in box 2 and 3. And now, by the way, if you would like a copy of this happiness quiz, just email me at sam@intrigueagency.com. We'll send a copy to you and to your family or to the people at work so you can do this happiness quiz together, because boy, does it bring out some epiphanies. So, box 1 and 4, what's right with our life? Box 2 or 3, what's not working in our life? Here's the question. How long? How long have you been doing those things you don't want to do? How long have you not been doing the things you want to do? Because John Foster Dulles said, the mark of a successful organization is not whether it has problems. It's whether it has the same problems it had last year. How can we hold ourselves accountable for doing something different? Because I bet we've all been to conferences and we leave and we vow to do things differently, and then 2 weeks later, everything's back to same old, same old. Not tonight, not today. Will you vow to do one thing differently? In fact, will you vow, put that quiz up on your refrigerator. So instead of those intentions drifting out of sight, out of mind, they stay top of mind because they're in sight, in mind. Could you vow once a week you're going to do something that would put the light on in your eyes and realize it is not selfish, it is smart. You are modeling to your loved ones that you matter, that you have need and interest, and that we can take care of others and take care of ourselves. And when you go to break, if you're here today or if you're watching this video, get out your digital device and put a date on the calendar right now of something that's important to you, something you've been thinking about, something you've been promising yourself you'll do someday. And one last story to wrap it up. I was speaking in Boston and a woman put her hand up and said, was there any place you missed on your year by the water? I said, yeah, I didn't make it to Walden Pond. And she said, you know it's an hour away. Blow me over with a feather, I didn't know it was an hour away. However, I acted on my lessons learned from the year by the water. It was so clear I wanted to do it. And I renegotiated a commitment. I was supposed to fly out that day and work with a client the next day. I called her, I explained the situation. I said, is there any way we can work together on Friday? She said, that's actually better for me. And I start driving, and I'm driving into another rainstorm. And this little voice says, go tomorrow, go in the morning. So I arrive first thing in the morning. There's only 3 cars in the parking lot. And here comes a man in his swim trunks with a towel thrown over his shoulder. It's October in New England. I'm thinking, really? And I go over, I said, is it warm enough to swim? And he said, it is if you go down at the end of the lake by the cove by his cabin. So I hike down there, and I get there, and the water is glass smooth, mirroring the red and the gold of the leaves. And I want to swim. I knew I was going to walk where Thoreau walked, and I was going to write where he wrote. I didn't know that I had a chance to swim where he swam. But see, there were all these reasons not to. I didn't have a swimsuit. My clothes would get all wet. It was cold. But as Chuck Yeager said, at the moment of truth, there are either reasons or results. At the end of our life, do we want reasons and regrets, or do we want results? And so I thought, clothes dry, memories don't. I thought of my dad and of that someday that never came. I thought of all the people who promised themselves they'll do more of what they want someday. And I went in. And I will always remember floating on my back on that lake and looking up at that sky. And for that moment in time, everything was right with my world. What is that one thing you're going to put on your calendar? What is that one thing you're going to do to put yourself back in your own story and understand it's not selfish, it's smart, it's not indulgent, it's inspiring? Next time you're about to procrastinate on something you care about, tell yourself out loud, I will never regret doing more of what's important to me. I will only regret not doing it sooner. Someday is not a day in the week.